Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Mikey, Stafford, Rory O'Neill with you. And as there's only 2 games this weekend, they're both in Ulster. We've brought in the Ulster Mafia in Niall, McCoy and Enda McGinley. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Pretty good, Mike. Good.
Good stuff. That's good stuff. Yeah, look, we'll get on to having a look at Fermanagh, Derry and Monaghan, Tyrone shortly. But there's a couple of notable departures, Rory, in the GAA world. John Costello is retiring from Dublin GAA later this year. He's been there since 1994, Rory. You get less for murder.
Yeah, it's an incredible length of service to have given. I think he'd be a huge loss to Dublin GAA, and I think it'd be a huge loss to the GAA in a much broader sense. I think his contribution... I
won't miss his annual reports.
I thought they were great. I mean, if you know John, and I would have gotten to know him quite well now over... I'm nearly 10 years a chair of a Dublin GAA club, so I've gotten to know him, through that role more than anything else. And he's been a great support to us and on our journey, and give us great guidance along the way. He's, an expert on GAA politics. To see him in action, actually, at county board conventions and county board meetings was a sight to behold. Just the way he could command a room, the level of authority that he had, his annual reports. I used to look forward to them because there was a bit of devilment and a bit of mischief in him as well. He's a fantastic sense of humor, a really funny fella. And I think, if you look back at Dublin GAA when he took over, and I think sometimes, I know the glory was there with football, and that would be the shining part of his legacy, along with obviously the constructions that might eventually happen with the Spa Well in Hollystown, which he was able to commercialise Dublin to a certain extent to try and get that type of funding up and running, because obviously nobody needs to be told how difficult and how expensive property is in the Dublin area. So to try and secure lands of that magnitude and to try and have the financial muscle to deal with all of that is just, he's leaving Dublin football and hurling, and I think in such a much better place. But I think that would be one of the big things I would say, in that, he presided over an unheralded period of success for Dublin GAA, 6 All-Ireland football titles in a row, completely transformed the football landscape and created arguably the greatest team that's ever been. But I think if you probably asked him in a private sense, I think it is his success in hurling that he would nearly be most proud of. If you go back to 1994, Dublin hurling was a joke. An absolute joke. Dublin hurling would have been considered, you're going down the ranks. You're not even Joe McDonough. You're probably talking Christy Ring level. That's how much of a farce Dublin hurling was. It just was not taken seriously. And people might say, oh yeah, well, look, they're not exactly winning All Irelands. But to get any county from that level up to where Dublin is actually considered a proper hurling county now, and a proper dual county, I think that's another thing that people tend to forget as well. The difficulties in running a county. It's very easy to run a county when you're only concentrating on one sport. Get Dublin into, and it was to push both codes equally and to give that charter the due respect that it deserves, and to watch how the programme of games in Dublin GAA is run week on week. Hurling football, every single year. Superb programme of games run very effectively by another absolute legend of Dublin GAA, John McNicholas, who I'd imagine is coming, to the end of his time as well. And I'd say that would be a big worry for Dublin GAA, because to see 2 men of that stature walk out to, set sail after giving such unbelievable service will be big shoes to fill. But from Costello's perspective, nothing but the utmost respect and for the man, and all you could do is wish him well.
Yeah, the CEO model Enda's kind of catching on a bit now, isn't it? You can see county boards feeling a need to be kind of more professional. They're gone from the full-time secretary who was kind of a admin job to now, nearly all county boards are looking to get somebody who is more kind of, I hate the word, but I suppose kind of visionary, someone who's kind of going to plan for the future rather than just making sure the bills are paid, which is kind of what the poor secretary was there for time in memoriam.
Yeah, and probably business savvy as well, being able to have that strategic vision to sort of be able to bring people with you towards a bigger future and be able to fund the thing. County board, certainly money wise, it's a large business at the minute, but in terms of Costello, I was texting Rory last night as a Tyrone man. I am delighted to see him gone, and I would hire him in the morning if we could. I know it's a sort of a national pastime to take umbrage, but his annual report was a great chance for me to take umbrage every year. What he said. The one thing he always done, and I don't know, maybe Rory, you'll know better, maybe it was tongue in cheek, maybe not, but when he was being chided about the multi millions that he had access to that the rest of the country didn't, he usually says, look, it's not Dublin's fault, it's up to the rest of the country to get their house in order. But like when you look at, say, for Tyrone, and we're a big county, we simply don't have that corporate wealth within the county for us to go and tap into, never mind the likes of your Leithrams of this world and all the other counties, and for him to stand on his pile of cash and to tell, well, use other little people, you need to get your own house in order, work harder, poor people. It really did rankle, but he defended Dublin to the hilt. He defended Croke Park being not a home venue to the hilt, so there was plenty of development there, but a shrewd man, and he ran Dublin well, and it was a huge part in their success, the appointments of Gilroy, the appointments of Gavin, all of that. Very, very impressive. I would like to borrow some of his development, and that says it all.
I know he as Roy said, look, he was powered by self-interest in that Dublin GA was what he was looking after. And now with that annual report, every year someone will say to me and say, oh, do we want to do something on John Costello's annual report? I'm like, no, I really don't. And then someone say, but read this paragraph. Oh, guy, all right, we better do something then. That's good, actually. He's got me.
That's it is. It is very funny. Like, I mean, I just think that the other thing as well is he did have quite his tentacles stretched further than what people sometimes realize. I mean, he would have been very instrumental in John Horan's election to president. I think he might have even been his campaign manager. And to be fair to John Horan,
surprised.
Yeah, right. I might have been, because John Horan, I think, got elected on the first count and just absolutely hosed his way through. And I think, to be fair to John Horan, like John Horan's presidency, I think in time will be looked back upon as being a very effective one. He was there when COVID began, obviously, and it would have been difficult times, but also the introduction of a second-tier competition. So, like, his influence is a second-tier competition in football, that is, and his influence, stretches further, and the respect I think that people would have in an administrative sense for Costello up and down the country would be immense now. Like, he'd be so highly well respected and well regarded, as much as a GA administrator can be. And he was some piece of work, in fairness to him. He was fantastic at his job.
Niall, the other significant departure this week is Tipperary hurling referee Fergal Horgan, who has said that he's stepping down from the intercounty panel due to a lack of appointments he's got, which at first you think, oh, okay, right, it's no, you don't want to be doing all those fitness tests and all that training if you're not getting the big gigs. Of the last 3 All-Irelands, he's done 2. He didn't do the All-Ireland final last year, but he did one of the semi-finals. So you kind of wonder whether there's another reason for this, because as far as in terms of appointments, he seems to be doing all right. Yeah,
you would wonder, Mikey, because you're reading the story and you're naturally the list of big games he's done recently, you're sort of scratching your head a wee bit. And it seems quite short-termism, like he's very definite that there's no coming back. So over a couple of weeks, over a couple of National League games, not getting any assignment, that just doesn't seem to fit. I think his point more about referees feeling quite isolated is probably the main takeaway from me. It's as high profile as they come in the game, yet he felt that he hadn't that support network there, and it's a wider problem obviously with referees, and I'm sure if you ask most referees at that level, it'd probably see a similar. So it's hard to know. Like, we don't know the support structures that are in place for referees or what the communication channels are like. But if someone as high profile is coming out and speaking out against it so strongly, it's probably worth taking notice of. So something maybe for the GA to look at. Like, I say they would have been a shock by it because they've lost one of their top men. Like, regardless of what he's saying about appointments or not, and I would imagine unless something has happened we don't know about, I'd imagine he would have been earmarked for some big games this summer or over the championship season, over the spring and the summer.
Absolutely. And like Rory, I suppose I looked at the Facebook comments on the story after we posted it, and it was like it was just unanimously people saying we're sorry you're going. I suppose he's kind of seen as kind of maybe the successor to the Barry Kelly, Brian Gavin line of hurling referees who aren't as whistle happy.
Ignored rules. Yeah.
So but then he's also following in the fine tradition of James McGrath, who also went down swinging when he
use me or lose me.
Yeah, use me or lose me. So let's be honest, and Enda, I'll ask you this because it's as relevant to football referees as hurling referees. You do have to have a bit of an ego and a bit of a kind of a cocksure attitude to be a referee, don't you? And even when they're resigning, it seems they kind of like to take a few down with them as they go.
It's elite level too. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we all know, I suppose, any referee that you don't want them to be centre of attention, but there is that wee thing they have to enjoy, that sense of authority and the control they have on the pitch, and sometimes they behave that way. But the likes of Horgan, obviously having reached the top, isn't too afflicted with that way in terms of letting it affect his refereeing style and making himself the centre of attention. He was obviously highly capable, but that point about support is interesting by Niall. I think that's valid. We put huge pressure on referees. I don't think we pay them enough in terms of games. I think I'd love to ask a wee bit more of them or give them a chance to review footage. I think the whole pressure that's coming on, particularly maybe on the football side, in terms of calling head injuries or calling fining of injury. I hate all this head injury stuff, but there's to put the responsibility on referees to cut that out in real time is just an impossibility. Like, to make that call is I think impossible on a pitch.
Because if you get that wrong, and you could end up looking like you could end up being like just looking like somebody who's effectively, not giving due credence to player welfare, and that's a really tricky situation.
Your primary responsibility as a referee is the safety of the players on the pitch. So the head injury shout that's endemic in the game. You go to a club game, and because they brought in the rule several years ago that they don't allow stoppages of play for injury, then everybody now shouts head injury. The game stopped. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But I'd love to see the refs given the opportunity that they sit down with their team afterwards and get to review a game on video, and this is at county level, and then submit the report, and that report then is untouchable. Essentially, it's there because it's based on the video evidence, and they've sat down after in the cool of the event and reviewed everything and cited anything that they haven't felt they dealt with at the time. Yeah. But again, that's extra hours of the day. And I was speaking to a referee that does some county football. They simply are paid buttons.
Yeah. Very,
very little. I think we need to put in more support around them, pay them a wee bit better, and then ask them a wee bit more in terms of the level that they're given, because there is falling short on that end, but we're demanding more and more in terms of their performance level, but we're not exactly supporting them to get there.
And we've had Barry Kelly on here before, Rory, and he's kind of said that. He said he would kind of welcome the opportunity to kind of come out afterwards and maybe kind of give an explanation, I think, or kind of give some kind of not every time, but if like some kind of a dialogue, I don't think would be unhelpful. I think I remember him saying it one time.
Yeah, when I was over, I was producer for the Sunday Game Live for the last couple of years, and I had the ref link, so I could hear Fergal Horgan. Actually, I had Fergal Horgan for one of those All Ireland finals, so it was very instructive. It was.
They did 2 of the last 3,
Exactly. So, so you could hear exactly what was being said on the field and his interaction, his reasoning behind the decisions, the authority that he had, and particularly him anyway. A lot of them have their very different styles. He'd be very vocal and would be one for constantly talking and explaining decisions to players, and as we know, was a key component and certainly a key one of these lads who let the game flow, was one of these fellas that obviously implied that tactic in a hurling sense, which is kind of, I think, and I think this goes back, it's a totally different discussion, but it does go back to your Brian Gavins of this world, where the euphemism, again, for letting the game flow is effectively ignoring the rule book. And that's where hurling has kind of gone. and there's no point in whinging about it now. I see some people whinging about the state of hurling, but anyway, look, that's not a discussion for today. But I think from Fergal Horgan's point of view, yeah, it was a strange decision. I mean, I do think you have to have a certain level of ego to survive and to actually get to that any elite level, whether it's refereeing or playing. And I think there's an incumbency upon everybody when they are competing, and they are competing because they're competing with other referees, to try and keep that in check to a degree, especially as a referee.
As Niall says, like if it's based on the lack of game time in the National League, I'm talking game time like a player, but if you've got a really solid, experienced player that you know is going to turn up in the championship, then in the National League is the time to get the other referees blooded up and get up to that level. You know that he's okay. You're obviously happy with him. You've given him huge games. But yeah,
and they do have a not particularly deep pool of hurling talent in a refereeing context. So I suppose from the people that make these appointments in terms of trying to flesh that pool out, I think what they may, just looking at it from the outside, I'm sure they'll have their reasoning, but they probably use the national leagues as an opportunity to try and put some depth, no different to a manager managing his players. So I don't know. I just think maybe he might have been a little rash. I'm sure when we got to Munster finals and All-Ireland semi-finals and All-Ireland finals, Fergal Horgan's name would have been right up there in the mix for all of the big appointments.
Not if Tipperary are making it all the way, Roy. Not if Tipperary making it all the way. Right, we'll move on to the matches. Fermanagh, Derry, Brewster Park, 5 p.m. Enda, to my eternal shame, I can't say I've ever been to Brewster Park, but it doesn't seem to me like the most hospitable place to go and play football. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Cozy ground.
Cold.
Have been there, refused to play in it once actually because it was that frozen solid for a mechanical game. And just with my history of injuries, I just said to Mikey, no, I'm really not fancying it today. So no, it's a nice wee ground. It's a good size of a county ground. They've redone the pitch, so Fermanagh were in Erinny during the National League, which is definitely going more country. And that benefited them well, funny, in the National League in terms of their home record. But they're back to Enniskillen now, new pitch surface. So it'll be in great condition, lovely stand there, good atmosphere and a good day. It's a really, really good ground, but it's compact, and I think it'll suit Fermanagh. I think Fermanagh will be looking to keep this game pretty tight. The word attritional could be used in multiple ways for this game, very likely. But Fermanagh are usually strong at home. They are a team a wee bit unlike the second fixture that we'll look at, Tyrone and in Healy Park. Is that a benefit or not to Tyrone? But certainly Brewster Park is definitely a benefit to Fermanagh.
Yeah. Niall, I suppose the big news is that we don't have it confirmed yet, but all the mood music out of Derry is that Conor Glass isn't going to be fit.
Wow.
Yeah, Rory Gallagher's trying to say it different, but I suppose we'll not really know until throw-in, I guess.
If anyone could recover in time, you get the impression it's Conor Glass. But
well, even if you look at the league final, like, you know, they were completely open. I know the game took on a different sort of life at that stage, like, but when he went off, they were completely open, and his positional sense and different things like that. You know, I was watching him. I went and watched Glenn a few times, and just watching him play, and he mightn't look spectacular, but the work he gets through is just phenomenal. Like, and he does the same for Derry. And I always remember his first came back from Derry after the AFL, and as they played Armagh up in Celtic Park, and there was no crowd. Obviously, it was right in the COVID, but a few media in, and I remember Rory Gallagher barking at him, and he barked right back at Rory and says, "You'll not be doing that for long. You'll soon learn." And he's just integral. So he would be a massive loss. We can assume Kieran McFall's not going to be up to fitness levels to feature, you wouldn't think. So it leaves Brendan Rodgers out there alongside, I don't know, Cassie or someone will probably come out to the middle or something like that if he's not fit. But it just gives Fermanagh a chink of light, because Rodgers and Glass is probably the hottest midfield partnership in Ireland right now. People can maybe argue that different teams, and Tyrone have a pretty good one and Dublin have a pretty good one. Like, but I think if you're picking one now, you wouldn't go far past Derry. So I don't know if I think he could still feature, to be honest, Mikey. Just the sort of things Rory was saying there during the week, it just sort of get the impression he'll definitely not be out. Like, I think we might even see him on the bench or play some part, which would be huge. But I think this is a game which just shows the progress Derry have made in 18 months. Because while Enda's right, Brewster is a real advantage, even if they haven't played there this year yet. It just looks to me almost like a banker. And you go back, 2 seasons ago, these teams were in the same division. Over the last 5 years, Fermanagh have operated at a higher division than Derry in the leagues. They're a really good team. They have a great wee coach in Kieran Donnelly there, who's got them playing good football. Ulton Kem, we spoke about many times in this podcast. Darren McGurn, a real physical presence in attack now. What Sean Quayle can bring off the bench, even boys like Ryan Lyons are so important to them. But I just think watching Derry this year, they just look like they can swat teams aside with a minimum of fuss, and I do think they'll probably do the same. I think they'll be 6 or 7 point winners when all's said and done.
Rory, this is a game that Derry kind of need. It's interesting that Enda says it's a compact enough pitch, which will kind of suit Fermanagh. I kind of think Derry, after what happened in Croke Park the last day, probably wouldn't mind getting back to what feels like a smaller pitch too, because we do all have this sense that Croke Park, they're not a Croke Park team, which can mean many different things, but to me it just means that the way they play, like they try to make the pitch as small as possible for the opposition when the opposition have the ball, which is hard to do in Croke Park. So I suppose it'll be interesting to see how they approach this game. Are they, as I think the assistant manager said during the week, are they just going, they just want to win Ulster and that's all they're thinking now? Or will they be using the Ulster Championship to try and tweak things so that when they do get back to headquarters, they're maybe a little bit better equipped for it?
Yeah, I think they'll feel like they will want to defend the Ulster title and want to put in a reasonably stern defence. And was it 25 years since they'd won an Ulster Championship, Niall? Last year, when they won it last year, I think when they won it last year, were we going back to 1998?
98, wasn't it?
Yeah.
98 since a big proud county like Derry. So I would imagine they will want to put in a pretty good defence of it, and that obviously starts on Saturday. And Conor Glass being injured, do we know? I couldn't find it last night. Chrissy McCaig and Owen McAvoy, I presume they're fit and ready to roll.
They're meant to be fit. Yeah, I think McCaig's ankle was a precautionary thing. McAvoy, well, so Gallagher's saying whether it is or not, but the only one he's definitely ruled out, I think, is Ashley McWilliams. I think. Yeah.
So, if you have the likes of McCaig and McAvoy coming in, then that's going to spell a certain amount of trouble for the likes of McGurn. I don't know whether Ulton Kelm will play on the wing or potentially in the corner. They might shift him out a little bit to try and kind of free him up, especially if they try and paired him off. Wouldn't necessarily see Chrissy McCaig picking him up, but he'll probably drift further up the field. But I think from Derry's perspective, given how flat they were in the National League final, it's a nice run-in to a championship match. 2 weeks sometimes is nearly ideal, especially when you're coming off a defeat. And you've got a week to sort of maybe process and now a week to build up again. And as long as all their injuries clear up, I think they should go into that game as favourites. But look, I think Niall's point is a really key one. You had two teams operating at a similar level for quite a long time. Derry seemed to have gone to another level since. And potentially that might be the difference on Saturday.
Yeah, Rory Gallagher, he tried to kind of shake it off after the game, the scoreline ended, but a manager like Rory Gallagher conceding 4 goals, like that'll have kept him awake at night. So to get McCaig and McAvoy back, it seems even more so than you could say Glass, almost from a defensive point of view, is crucial because their full back line has been like a bear pit for the last couple of years, and it wasn't the last day. And I know McAvoy is new, but he slotted in there brilliantly. But Chrissy McCaig, we all know what Chrissy McCaig is. He's possibly the best man marker in the country, and if he's not there, who ties up the marquee forward on the other team? So also the back is huge.
They've had to move Brenton Rodgers out again, going back to the thinness of the Derry panel, which I think was exposed against Dublin. They've moved Brenton Rodgers out because Emmett Bradley's away this year, who was playing midfield. So yes, Owen McAvoy has come in great, but it means your options are thinner again on the ground. Ashley McWilliams, who is one of their main subs to come in, if he's out, if Conor Glass is out, you're looking at a really, really stretched team. He obviously made a big shout about the under-20 championship because he's 4 or 5 under-20s on the panel, and that's only on a panel of 27 he's carrying. And if 2 or 3 of them are down, does he have a full 26 actually to name it's phenomenally tight margins that he's doing. and he doesn't have huge experience. Like if the likes of Lachlan Murray starts, which you would imagine he will if those other men are missing, I think actually Kieran McFall, if he's home in any fitness, I think he could well see game time. He is an excellent player whenever he's fully fit and fully at it. He's a player out of a lot of time for now, and I think he will make an impact on that team and give them that wee bit of added depth or options to move things around. But they are stretched. Do they have enough to get over Fermanagh? They probably will, but they don't like playing teams that keep it really compact and keep it really simple, a la Louth in the league obviously has been thrown up several times against them. And I think Fermanagh are on a bit of a crest of a wave. They are delighted with where they have come to through the National League. Now, some of the results they were fortuitous enough, but that is a very, very happy Fermanagh camp, and they love playing the underdog. They'll love seeing Derry come in with all the hype and that's around them. I don't think Gallagher will read too much into the Croke Park thing. I think he'll note the openness. He'll be a wee bit annoyed that it's give credence to people saying about the thin panel, because he lost a couple of people and then they were particularly open after that. Whenever they get behind in a game, they definitely struggle to deal with that, particularly at that key moment in the second half of their 3-4 down, and then suddenly they have to come out and address the game. I think that's a tough situation for them to be. Will Fermanagh get to that point? It's tough to see it, to be honest. I think it'll be more of an arm wrestle, but you would still imagine that Derry have too much.
Yeah. Okay. Is anybody not saying a Derry win here? I think we're all saying Derry win. Yeah.
Derry by 3 or 4.
All right. We'll get on to the second and final senior intercounty championship match, which is a point in itself. Last weekend we started with a bit of a splash, not that many games, manageable, 6, 7, 8 games maybe. Next weekend we've 17 matches between football and hurling, so this week we're just going to ease in with the 2. Now there is Joe McDonough and there's lower league hurling matches, I admit, but in terms of Sam Maguire, Liam McCarthy, 2 matches, both in Ulster.
And what you're going to see now as well, Mikey, over the coming weeks, because straight away, right, like it'll be quiet this week because everyone will get to see all the football that they need to see. But next week there'll be a rake of games that people won't be able to see, and the whinging will start then, and the giving out about RTÉ and why can't we see this and why can't we see that. I mean, 17 matches, like, you know, there's still only 4 broadcasting slots, you know, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock on a Saturday, and it's straight, like, you can see it coming on the track now, a mile off. The whinging and moaning will start again, and this is all because, and another thing, actually, just one other point, and I'd be very interested again in everybody's views on this, and I've seen it written there recently, and it's not an unreasonable point about the standard and the quality of the football that we've seen thus far. I thought Martin Breheny was making the point in his independent piece. To be fair to him, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. But one thing that I think he didn't mention at all, we're playing winter football. I mean, the conditions last weekend were appalling. Like, I mean, I was coming home from work the other night. I was doing a women's international football match. It was -2 in the car coming home. It lashed rain all day yesterday. Now, I think potentially the weather this weekend is meant to improve. But what do people expect in the wintertime when you play your championships at this time of the year? Like, there's a reason these guys that came up with this thing called the Gaelic Athletic Association planted the shop window in the middle of the summer. You know, there was a reason behind that.
Yeah, there is. And we do, like, championship starts, we have like the nice romantic idea of, well, for a certain age group, it's the ice cream van. For another age group, it's a nice pint bottle with a pint glass of ice outside a pub before you make your way to the stadium. We wouldn't be doing the ice cream vans weren't making too much money last weekend. So it does take something away, not to sound too traditionalist and romantic, but it does take something away for the spectators, never mind the players, when the championship started in, like, well, it was freakish kind of wintry conditions last weekend, but for April, but it was still wintry. It wasn't remotely summerish, and that does have an impact on the teams.
It's bleak. It was very bleak. Just the driving wind and rain, and the poor cameramen that are trying to cover it. So yeah, it's not good. Like, the other thing that has to be factored in, we are seeing more football than we ever seen. Like, if you rewind the clock 20 years ago, thank the Lord that there was not cameras around all the various National League games and all the small sort of provincial championship games.
The suspensions you lads would have picked up. You would have played about 2 games a year.
It was horrific type of stuff. You know, and we got to see, like, so much of the highlights reels is based on All-Ireland semi-finals and All-Ireland finals. You know, we're all looking back at the golden years and based on the iconic key moments. We don't see all the hours and hours of football and the analysis and the podcast and everything else that's now into the game. So we are killing ourselves by trying to break down absolutely everything and expecting every game to be brilliant. You look at the Premiership, it goes all over the world as this phenomenal thing. If you watched every single, you'll have 1 or 2 really good games any weekend. The rest aren't really, and then you'll have your couple of iconic games during the season, and the rest are a shade of grey. Are we that dissimilar? Now, tactically, the game is reverting back to defensive football. I think that debate is going to grow and grow during the summer. We've been having it for years.
And I think that's a really interesting point as well, because I was like, I mean, the reality here, right? I suppose it's a frustration for people that like Gaelic football and lovers of it and watch it and really enjoy it and like to see it played with a slightly bit more, with a little bit more adventure and a small bit more,
everybody does. Every manager, every player.
But the reality with modern intercounty championship, certainly this championship this year, it's going to take 4 defeats for you to be evicted from it. You'll have to be beaten 4 times before you're eventually turfed out of a championship. So to my mind, the pressure valve that was associated with the straight knockout championships, or certainly where you got one back door and you only had one, like the necessity then to try and play that ultra defensive stuff.
Coaches have tried to play attacking football. They've tried, and then eventually they're charged with naivety. You go back to Kevin McStade's Roscommon and Armagh, they had a phenomenal game of football several years ago. Just all out, I was down at it. It was attacking end to end. It was phenomenal. Both teams now are playing. You know, it is, and that is not, I would maintain every manager and every player, given the choice, absolutely. We'll play natural, good old fashioned, more attacking Gaelic football. The problem is all of them managers and players also know when you come up against a sort of defensive tactic team, that is the tactics that wins at the minute.
Yeah.
Dublin are doing it, Kerry are doing it. Anybody that thinks that you drop behind the ball until the rule changes in the game, that is the tactic that works. So in terms of trying different things out, why you have to be really good at what way you're going to play it. Now there's shades of intensity in terms of how much people are dropping back. Are they giving up kickouts? So there's variances within that, but the broad tactic in the game is for the vast majority of players that you fall behind the ball whenever you're out of possession, and you become more and more and more compact, and then you look to break out. Do you keep 1 player, 2 players up the pitch, maybe 3? Do you do a press and the kick out? Those are variables, but every team is doing it because that is the way to play football at the minute, as the rules allow it. Yeah. Unless the rules, for me, fundamental, and the forward mark, I hate the thing. I never could see how it was going to change it, because if the forward mark was a success, if lots and lots of teams were using the forward mark, how do you cut it out? Well, you make sure there's no space in your defence for a long kick pass in, if you know what I mean. So, or else the teams get really good at the wee clever 20-yard marks that nobody likes anyway, and getting cheap free kicks, essentially.
And that's what we're seeing. Mayo were getting very good at that during the league, and there's nothing wrong with it, as you say. Like, they're not gaming the system; they're playing to the rules of the game, but it doesn't make for particularly attractive football.
But it's not. I imagine that the people that brought in the forward mark, our sort of traditionalists, they were, imagine the glory days of a 70-yard hoofed ball in and a 6'3".
They had Michael Murphy and Kieran Donaghy in their heads.
The crowd. I don't think it has fundamentally changed the game at all. I think the benefit is still, the safety is still there in numbers, and then you break out.
Okay. We better get on. Sorry, time is against us. He just doesn't want to preview Tyrone playing at home. No, Enda's trying to stall him to preview this game.
Speaking of defensive football, Tyrone v Monaghan.
Yes. And next to Healy Park for a free-flowing game of football.
But Funny enough, I don't know if Tyrone are playing that defensive. I think Tyrone probably blueprinted an early version of defensive football. But I think Tyrone. Well, okay, you can educate me on that one. In fairness, Enda, right? But I was watching a good bit of them now over the last couple of days, and I think Tyrone are slightly more adventurous than people think. I think they had a couple of personnel issues in terms of team selection. Cathal McShane seems to have lost his place. Like, I don't know whether it's an injury. He hasn't appeared on even a 26 for the last couple of games. But funnily enough, I actually think there's a better balance to their attack. And they definitely still haven't decided on who their number 6 is. Is that essential for them? Well, it is to a certain extent. Like they tried Cormac Monroe, then they've tried Niall.
They tried Petey Hart for a while.
Yeah, Frank Burns as well.
But I thought Ronan McNamee coming in there did a really good job the last day, and him coming back has really offered a huge amount of solidity, I think, to that Tyrone defence. Another thing for Tyrone for me, which was Kerry. I think there's just, if you look at how many times Tyrone used Kerry as a springboard to sort of reignite seasons or to sort of bring out the best in Tyrone, I think they had sort of flipped and flopped their way through the early stages of the league. But I think we got a really good glimpse at the real Tyrone the day Kerry travelled up to Healy Park. And I think they've gone from strength to strength since then. And relegating Armagh in the process, I would imagine, was quite the feather in the cap to finish out and bookend the league from their point of view. But I think there's something brewing in Tyrone.
Well, it's certainly, Niall, I'll come to the Tyrone man in a minute. Niall, it's certainly a lot less bleak looking than it was in the first few rounds of the league, when Tyrone really did seem to be a little bit lost, having had their customary poor defensive and All-Ireland title. People probably were expecting a bit more early on, but as Rory says, results have bounced back, and one of their good results was, putting, I think, 4 goals past Monaghan in the league in Clonus. 2 goals they scored, 2-15-13, and Niall, but the thing here is, seasoned those football watchers, Tyrone do tend to beat Monaghan in the championship. That's kind of what happens, isn't it? Not always, but most of the time.
Per Enda and the boys used to bully Monaghan, used to break their hearts all the time. Her Banty hasn't forgiven them. But I think Rory's right there. They're mixing up a wee bit. They'll throw Kilpatrick or Kennedy into the square and maybe go long.
That's another really interesting one. The way Kilpatrick and Kennedy are drifting into the square and just popping up out of nowhere as well.
I think the establishment of by Enda obviously knows where Joe Goose there gives them that sort of comfort blanket where they can do that and feel that if it doesn't come off, they still have that safety net there, that they can try it. And I suppose they're trying to vary it up, and you need that going into championship season. As you say, after coming out of Castle Bar, it's finally are we seeing Tyrone take a couple of steps back and then decided to carry jersey, and it just takes out the best of Matty Donnelly and Petey Hart and boys like that, and all of a sudden people are talking about Tyrone as a bit of a dark horse. I think the more interesting thing for me rather than the match is the prestige of the Ulster Championship this year. It's still talked about, everyone keeps saying Ulster football is the one provincial championship, but I think within the province, I don't know what Enda thinks, for me, it has lost a touch of a sparkle over the last couple of years. I thought Derry did reignite it a bit last year, but a couple of things to consider here. Whatever happens, whoever loses this match, they're both going to enter the All-Ireland stage or championship at the exact same stage. And the other thing, the plum draw, the worst thing for an Ulster team in the Sam Maguire race this year is
get the Ulster champions.
Lose an Ulster final, Rory. Because if you lose an Ulster final, you, as far as I know, you'll be in a group with either most likely Sligo, New York, and Limerick and Clare. So whoever's coming out of those 2 matches are teams you would like to draw in your round robin group. But if you lose the provincial final, assuming they do not beat Galway, Roscommon or Kerry, which I think we can give is very, very likely. So you're in that seeding group, that pot 2. That pot 2's group's going to probably be the weakest group of the 4. So Peter Canavan, I think, spoke about it on the Sunday game the other week about how the seeding groups need to be tweaked, and I couldn't agree more. Because if you ask me now with Armagh, I'm an Armagh man, obviously, would I rather lose an Ulster semi-final or a final? No one wants to lose a final, of course. I'd rather go out in the semi-final because it would benefit Armagh in the All-Ireland race. the more chance of getting a better All-Ireland round-robin group. So I don't think it'll play in that much. I think the fact that Mayo and Roscommon went at it really, really hard last week sort of laid any fears that teams may be looking at that. But we're still talking about Mayo having, maybe it might work out for the best of them losing that match. So I think if Monaghan lose this or Tyrone lose this, I think people are going to say, right, well, okay, they've got 6 weeks now to go and, recover, get set up and sort of just seep into the background and come again. So I just think the provincials have been weakened a bit, and I include Ulster in that. Like, as I say, I don't know if Enda agrees, but I do think it's lost a bit of a sparkle for what would be a match I would have years ago got really excited about.
Oh, yeah.
Just sort of like, whatever happens, it's not going to have that big much of an impact.
Yeah, I think you're completely relying on the fact that boys still hate losing.
Yeah,
and hate each other.
Yeah. So that'll drive on a certain amount. The key thing for any team now will be the impact of the loss in the championship will be as much as you allow it to be. That's it. If you decide that it's nothing, and you can look at Cork against Clare, sorry to bring it up again, but that impact on Cork, it's up to Cork how much that they're still going to be in the Ireland Championship because they finished nice and high in Division 2. So it's up to them. Regroup, go at it again. Don't let it afflict too soon. And the same for Monaghan Tyrone. So the nature of how you get beat and the nature of how you go out and the nature of how the team handles that and then builds for the next thing, their ambition for the next thing. In terms of Monaghan, in terms of this game, Monaghan, you mentioned at the start, Tyrone have always beat Monaghan. Monaghan under Malachy O'Rourke turned over Tyrone a few times within Ulster, but Tyrone always beat them in Croke Park. If this game was in Croke Park, I'd be very confident of a Tyrone win. If it was in Clonus, I'd probably be happy enough because Tyrone love playing in Clonus. We've all played in it so much over the years, it's like a home venue to us. But Healy Park on a wintry enough weekend, it's not a particular advantage, to be honest. I think the two teams are pretty even. But again, does either team lose massively by going out at this stage? I don't think so. But I still think, given just that basic competitive nature, I think it'll be a competitive game. Monaghan for me are Roscommon, are Monaghan, if you know what I mean. I think well capable of provincial success, and everybody knows that. Everybody respects the work that goes on, small numbers, yada, yada, yada. But people just don't see them making the big inroads of winning a big match in Croke Park come semi-final stage. Or quarter-final stage against one of the big hitters. They have not downed a big gun in Croke Park in summer. Neither team, and until they do, they're going to be these provincial ones that can nip people, absolutely put people out. Would it surprise you at all for Monaghan to beat Tyrone? No. But they have to build a name for those bigger things then come the summer.
Yeah. Niall, how do you see it going? As you say, Tyrone are building. They have a recent win over Monaghan, but Monaghan will be a bit like the few teams kind of came out of the league with a real kind of bounce, and this is what Monaghan do every year, but the bounce is a bit closer to the championship this year than usual. Like they could only be buoyed by the way that they stayed up.
That league match, Tyrone got the goals at good times, and I think Monaghan up with 13. I think Jack McCarn got a black card, and then it was a Killian Lavelle card and got overturned. How do you see it going? Yeah, I think the fact that Tyrone are unbeaten at Healy this year is massive for them, because it has been a bit of a stumbling block and has been an issue. We all remember Conor McManus's point from the sideline a couple of years ago up at Healy to seal the Monaghan win. So just on McManus, like, it feels like he's played a couple of minutes this year and he's their second highest scorer. So it's mad. Like, Bannigan's got more, who I think is just an absolutely brilliant player. Probably hasn't come to national attention just yet, but he's coming. He's a really, really enjoyable player. I just can't see a way in Monaghan winning. I don't think there's going to be any big gap. I just think Tyrone will have enough. I think their older players, Hampsley's found a bit of form again. Donnelly seems re-inspired by that Kerry match. Petey Hart's playing good stuff. Ronnie McNamee's come back in, kicked a lovely point against Armagh.
Derek Canavan. I think Derek Canavan is going. I think this fella's going to be special, lads. That's not exactly predicting the Ladbroke numbers, but
it's like getting an
he seems to be really finding his feet at intercounty football. I mean, it probably took a year because he was so young, I suppose. Enda, would that be fair?
Yeah, he's and he still is young, but he certainly took time to. I think, feel that he belonged and taken ownership. I think what we've seen at times during the National League is you can see him feeling this is my team. This is, that he's very much one of them and he's responsible to the others and a key part of whatever the team can do. The boys need him, and I think he's standing up and now embracing that type of ownership. The end sort of thing against Kerry was brilliant. Like, it just so summed him up. But
he's a provider and he's a finisher, really, isn't he, Enda? Which is a rare enough thing to get now in Gaelic football, where you have a guy who's excels at both.
Yeah, and he's just got that wee bit of magic, that wee bit of feet work, that he can create the wee chinks in the armour that suddenly then releases the coil of a blanket defence and gets a move going, or as you say, he can finish himself. So no, he can be happy that he's got a good league campaign under his belt now. He'll want to push on and for the championship. Tyrone, for me, I think they're still hit and miss. I don't know what Tyrone I'm going to be facing coming out here. The last time I watched a championship match in Omagh with Tyrone, it was Derry, and it was abysmal last year. And now obviously Tyrone were in the absolute rut last year. But did they barely scored, or did they score in the first half? It was just
Memories
desperate stuff from Tyrone last year. So you'd hope for more from them. But I think they're still missing a consistency at the minute. They're still looking those big spark games. But the season's still young, and can they build something? I think a good, credible performance. I think this is a perfect test for them. Monaghan carry lots of threat up front. Hardy defenders that are going to be tough to get away with. This is going to be hard fought, and it'll be a good measure of where Tyrone are at the minute.
Okay, in a word, who wins it, Enda?
We'll go Tyrone.
Hey, that's it. Patriotism. Niall, yourself?
Yeah, I can't see past Tyrone.
Rory?
Yeah, I think Monaghan will make it tight. They need to keep their discipline. Red cards, I think, are going to be key, is particularly this year, given the suspensions could affect, if you get beaten, the suspension will carry into, obviously, your Sam Maguire round robin, and you don't want to serve it at that level. So regardless of what happens, I think it'll be important for Monaghan to keep 15 players on the field and make it competitive. But I think Tyrone are, coming. I think they have a renewed sense of spirit about them, and there's just so much quality in their attack, and I think they will win a tight one.
Okay, well, I'm romantic here, so I'm going to go for Monaghan. I think they're going to be convinced that the league is still on and they actually need to win this match to stay in Division 1. They're going to bring that league mindset to the championship. That's what they need. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Enjoyed that. You can follow all the matches on Saturday and Sunday Sport on RTÉ Radio 1 and on the RTÉ website and the RTÉ News app with our live blogs, etc. The first match for Fermanagh Derry is on BBC Northern Ireland, and the Tyrone Monaghan game is on RTÉ2 and the RTÉ Player. And the Sunday game will be back, as always, at Sunday evening, 9:30. So thank you, Niall. Thank you, Enda. Thank you, Rory. We'll chat to you again on Monday. Good luck. Goodbye.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it! It's over